thank you all for having me. My name is Joseph Rivara. I lead US content sales at Twitter. I'm going to give a quick PSA. The P font, this isn't a joke. So Twitter developed its own font. It's called Chirp. And today, regrettably, you are not going to see the Chirp font because it didn't transfer with this presentation. So it's fine, we'll live. But if somebody in the brand team at Twitter is watching this right now, they're super offended because this is not the font they selected for this presentation. So thank you for that. And with it, I'll fake click so we can jump to the next slide and into the good stuff. All good. So the topic we're going to cover today is something that I love. We're going to talk about sports, and specifically, we're going to talk about the changes in sports content consumption. And I think this actually, segues nicely from the chat prior to this, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about is just changes and shifts that we're seeing in consumption. So this probably goes without saying. The last 2 years have been weird. It's been different for basically all of us. And if you think about the way that we interact with one another, the way we work, a lot of things have just changed, whether it's, video messaging services, Slack, if you have kids doing e-learning. There's so many of these companies and so many of these options for so long. And in these times of lockdown, it's now become the only option, sort of become necessity. And so I think very similarly to the way that we're seeing trends in media consumption, because anybody in this room who's been in the industry for more than 5 or 6 years knows there's been this shift from TV into digital, into streaming, into mobile. But what happened in 2020 and what we've seen on Twitter is really that trend has absolutely moved into hyperspeed. And when you think about sports specifically, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to the stadium to watch the game. I'm not in a full bar experiencing that game with strangers. I'm not even having friends in my house, in my living room, to watch the game together. But what we are all doing, and what some people are doing right now, I'm not offended, is you're picking up your phone and you're getting information. You're picking up your phone, you're getting entertained. So the phone has become this critical tool that's so vital to everything that we do. I'll click over to the next slide slowly. Oh, let's do that. That works.
Try that. If it works, just pretend and I'll click it if it doesn't.
Oh, perfect. I like that. This is an interesting insight. It was from a Variety article earlier this year. But what the article suggested is that sports fans, particularly young sports fans, would rather consume highlights of a sports game than watch the full live broadcast. And I remember when I first saw this, I was like, Jesus, come on. Are you kidding me? I'm like, this isn't a real sports fan. You're not a real sports fan if you can't sit down on Sunday and watch the full Giants game. But it started to kind of gel and started to make some sense to me, young kids at home. And if I'm being completely honest, I can't sit down and watch 4 quarters of the Knicks on MSG. I mean, there were years where I didn't want to, but now when I actually want to, I can't. So, what do I do? While my daughters are occupying every TV in the house watching God knows what, I pull up my phone and I try and watch those real-time highlights on Twitter. If I can't even get it to it that day, maybe the next day I'll watch 8 to 10 minutes of condensed highlights on YouTube. But that's sort of how I've begun consuming sports content. And I still definitely consider myself an avid sports fan and follower of the Knicks and Giants. And if you zoom out a little bit on the next slide.
Yeah. Taking its time moving from slide to slide.
It's all right. It's the fonts.
No. Soon. Hang on. You'll get there.
That you come to Twitter. The major utility they find in our platform as sports fans is to watch highlights. That's why they're coming to the platform. And so being part of a global content partnerships team whose job it is to program content, our focus then becomes making sure we have real-time highlights from every major sports league, every major sports broadcaster, and every major sports event. And what I like to say, and this might sound cheesy, is that the highlight, it means more on Twitter. It's more than just the video segment. My entire career, I've sold sports highlights in some type of fashion. And when you hear even the word sports highlights, it sounds so boring. It's like, oh, sports highlight. But what it actually is, especially on Twitter, is it's a fragment of video that just happened in real time, and Twitter helps put context to the situation. So if you think about Sunday, if you're a Chiefs or Bills fan, you'll get this. If not, just roll with me here. But if you followed that game, there were definitely moments in that game where you were like, God, I wonder what people think about this right now. There was a roughing the passer call late in the game. It probably wasn't roughing the passer, but people had opinions on it. And so when we think about real-time highlights on Twitter, what it is it's the opportunity to put video in that moment and sort of allow users to provide that context, that conversation around that moment. And that's what makes the highlight so unique. And so in this next slide, this is damning for TV, but this is 2020. Things got a little bit better in 2021. But TV ratings across college football and NFL from Nielsen, they were down, and they were down pretty dramatically. And while I know some of this is picked up in 2021, it doesn't change the fact that over the past 5 years, this really hasn't been an area of growth. And as the last panel mentioned, right, costs keep going up, up, and up. Did you see, everyone, how much people paid for NFL media rights in the last cycle? It's not going down. So that trend just continues to happen. And then when we look on the Twitter side of this, we're seeing enormous year-over-year increase in video consumption. And that's not all on us, right? That's because people want to go to their phone into these apps to consume content in a different way. Now, when we compare ourselves to our peer set, and this may be interesting for a few of you who are not big Twitter users, but our real shining moment, our real utility as an app is around tentpole events. If something big is happening in the world, it's happening on Twitter, people are watching it on Twitter. So if it's the March Madness, if it's Super Bowl, if you look at ComScore data, you'll see over and over, more people literally use our app than they use other apps in those moments. They're turning to Twitter as the ultimate second screen. So we're not surprised when our video consumption stats are better than our competitive set during these big tentpole moments. But what's a little bit more surprising on the next slide is when you stretch it out, I think, yep, this is it. But when you stretch it out, and the examples here are wrong, the top should say NCAA basketball, and the bottom should say the 2021 NFL season. But over the course of those entire seasons, we still had more video viewership than our peer set. And while we're not naming our peer set, I will tell you they have more audience than us, they have more DAUs than us. But the difference between us and those platforms is we make it our goal, our objective, to one, license all of the real-time highlights from official broadcast partners, official leagues. And two, our audience comes to Twitter with purpose. They're coming literally to consume that content. Something's happening, maybe TV is cueing them into it, or maybe they're just aware of it happening in the world, but they're coming to Twitter with the purpose to find that content. And the other thing that helps us is sports moments aren't just one moment. It isn't just the Super Bowl. Every Sunday, and I challenge everybody here if they want to try it, every Sunday, go onto Twitter. I guarantee 5 of the top 10 trending topics are going to be NFL related. People are just talking about that because it's happening in the moment, and there's that deep passion for sports. And so this is when it all comes together and you add all of these moments together, you get to about 25 billion video views year to date, MRC video views. And I know a lot of people look at Twitter and they think of it as more of a niche player, maybe a smaller platform. They probably don't think that we could drive that much video consumption over these periods of time. And it's because, again, so many of these moments are happening on our platform every day. And that is why all of the logos on this slide, most of the logos that many of you in this room work with Twitter. They're working with Twitter so they can augment that fan experience and create real-time content on our platform. And whether it's ESPN or NBC Sports thinking of Twitter as an extension, a video extension to provide more reach to their advertisers, or it's the NFL or NBA looking at us as a way to reach a younger audience, drive more conversation, drive more engagement. And when we're talking to them about the content they should create for Twitter, we're focusing them around a few things. You have to create content that's culturally relevant. You have to create content that drives conversation. What is an action that I could actually ask the audience to make? Unlike TV, Twitter talks back. So you can actually put something out there and ask people to respond and create that immersive experience. And it has to be real time. The baseline of anything we ever do with any of our sports partners is real time highlights, because we know the power of having that video in real time. And with this, there's no better example than the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. So this Olympics, obviously unique, didn't really have that in-person experience of past Olympics. But if I'm being honest, that actually benefited us on Twitter, because Twitter was the place where there was a sense of community. There was other people cheering on this event, talking about their favorite athletes, talking about medal count. That was happening in the forms of tweets, and billions of tweets over that entire experience were happening on Twitter. And for our partnership on the event, we knew that we had to go right to the source. So we were going to work with NBC Sports. They were the main rights holder in the United States. They had access to all the top content. But the difference between our partnership with NBC this time around than previous partnerships is we really focused on being more than just a small social extension and really a core part of their fundamental distribution and content plans. So in terms of distribution, they leaned into Twitter Amplify, which is a product that's brand safe, it's measurable, it allows you to reach the audiences you're trying to reach on Twitter. And how that physically gets done is NBC takes their premium content, publish it into Twitter, a brand's message gets associated with that content via pre-roll or some other type of brand experience, and it gets targeted to the audience the brand is trying to reach. And the benefit for the brand is obviously that content association, and the benefit for someone like NBC Sports is they get an enormous amount of reach as people are amplifying their content. It's leading to more discovery on the platform. And in terms of specific content around this event, we had all the real-time highlights from all the top moments. We had live look-ins, which users could vote on and actually be taken into the live experience of any game that was happening in that moment. And we did a daily live show each morning talking about the top moments from the games, and that was sponsored by Toyota. And it wasn't just Toyota that joined in on this experience with us. It was actually over 60 brands over the course of this 3-week period participated in our Amplify sponsorship with NBC Sports on Twitter. And it was just driving a ton of value for both consumers and for brands alike. And so with that, what I'll finish by saying is, if it's happening in the world, people are watching it on Twitter. We're super excited to be working with NBC Sports again around the Winter Olympics. We're talking now about what that experience could really look like. But whether it's the Olympics, it's the World Cup, it's March Madness, or it's just Tom Brady, going back to New England with the Bucks, those are all moments that happen on Twitter. And the way that people are consuming these moments are changing. So we should listen and ride with it. So thank you at all the drinking events. So I'll see you there. Thanks.